Good morning, everyone. So welcome to the final day of SQL Bits. I know that it is 8 o'clock in the morning here in London. We had a late night at the conference party last night, so I want to say thank you to each of you that got up, came in, and made time in your day for this talk. My name is Matthew Roche. I'm a principal program manager on the Power BI customer advisory team at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft in a variety of product and non-product roles for around 14 years. I've been working in data for around 25 years. And this is the most personal and painful conference talk that I have ever given. So I want to start off with sort of a content warning that you are getting my authentic, unfiltered self today. At some point during this talk, it's likely that I'm going to swear. At some point during this talk, it's likely that I will cry. And I know for certain that I'm going to include images of people, like attractive young people in leather costumes that I can't fit into after 2 years of a pandemic. But the reason why this talk is important to me, the reason why we're having this session is because the general topic of mental health in IT or mental health for data professionals, it's really important, but it's something that no one wants to talk about. And I'm at a point in my career, in my life, where I'm safe. Like, I'm the person that gets invited to talk at conferences. I've been around long enough that I know that I can share my failings, my challenges, my weaknesses, and not be in danger. Not everyone is in that position, so I wanted to take advantage of my privilege and share. And I was inspired by Greta Thunberg, and I know that I'm pronouncing her last name incorrectly, but this young Swedish climate activist who a few years ago went on Twitter while she was being attacked by some of the most powerful people in the world that objected to her climate advocacy. And she basically said, I know that I'm different. I know that my autism behaviors, my Asperger's diagnosis makes me different, but being different is a superpower. And this is something that is incredibly true when you realize that strength comes from diversity, that when you're on a team, the value that you bring to the team, it's not just from your strengths, it's from those strengths that are not the same as the strengths of the other people on the team. So when you're different and you find the place where you belong, this is the chance for you to really shine. And the reason that I knew about this quote, I don't follow Greta on Twitter, it's because a few years ago, this is towards the beginning of the pandemic, another data professional reached out to me basically saying that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and some of the things that I had said about how my weird brain makes my life different, that really resonated with him. I should say makes my life difficult. It really resonated with him. And he went out of his way to call out both how he had struggled when he and I had worked together in the past. And for me, he was like this great data guy working with big data before anybody else was. And he felt very anxious. He felt very insecure, even though it wasn't obvious to me. But he pointed out two things. The first one was that he observes that people's biggest strengths and their deepest weaknesses are really just two sides of the same coin. And he was the one that called out to me about Greta Thunberg saying that Asperger's was her superpower. And the only reason that this friend reached out to me was because back in 2018, I wrote a blog post in my personal blog talking about how talking about mental health is important. And what I want to do in this talk is basically tie these themes together using my own career and some of my own personal struggles as the unifying theme. But that idea of our differences being our superpowers, the things that challenge us and make us struggle, being the very things that make us different, that make us powerful, that make us the person that can do things that no one else can do. This is what I want to talk about, and I actually want to start introducing superpowers through the lens of my 16-year-old comic book fandom. So when I was 16, had my first job, I would go to the comic book store, like cash my paycheck there, and spend most of it on X-Men comic books back in the 80s. And all of the pictures that I have are from the movies, not from the comics. But I want to use the X-Men because I think that the context of the X-Men and that Marvel universe, whether it is the movies or the comics, there are a lot of parallels between the stigma of being a mutant and the stigma of being neurodivergent. So if you have ADHD, if you are on the autism spectrum, if you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have bipolar disorder, these are a lot of challenges that make you different than a lot of people around you. And these people are different than the people around them, right? But when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, it's like, look, this dude has claws. That girl can fly. You see the power, and when you're reading the comic books, like, oh, they're talking about, like, oh, what a curse this is, and you don't really get it until you have, 16-year-old Matthew didn't really get it. You guys, you may have clued in early on that this is a curse, that being different, being excluded, introduces challenges. I just thought it was a cool thing because you can fly around and wear cool costumes. But when you look at the X-Men, it's probably Wolverine who gets all the spin-off movies that you think of. So it's kind of obvious that if your superpower includes metal claws coming out of your body, like that's gotta hurt, right? But what about Rogue? Does anybody know who Rogue is if you're like an X-Men fan? So bunch of hands going up. When I was that teenage nerd, I thought Rogue was the coolest X-Man because her powers were basically she could touch anyone and steal their powers. Like any superhero, any supervillain, all she needed to do was touch them, and then she could fly or do storm things. And this seemed like the most useful thing in a fight, right? She was always the one that saved the day because she had that situational skill that she could bring. But think about this, if when you touch someone, you're sucking the life energy out. When she's trying to have a relationship, she's trying to express affection to someone. What happens if when you're trying to love someone, you hurt them? When you're trying to reach out and you cause someone pain, it's like, this is something, if you've struggled with mental health, you know that sometimes you do things that you don't mean to do. You're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to reach out to the people that you love, but you're not part of the solution. You're part of the problem. And this type of challenge where there's something about you that means that your default way of interacting with people doesn't always work the way that you want, sometimes you need a mentor. Sometimes you need a voice of experience, a voice of authority, someone who can help you find the safe way for you to be yourself, to bring not just the normal part, not just the human part, but that different, mutant, unique part of you, and still be the person that you want to be, being a better force in the world. And for the X-Men, they have Jean-Luc Picard. They have Professor Xavier, right? So he's been there, he's done that. By the time that the X-Men come around, he has been making his way as a mutant in a world that hates and excludes mutants. He's come to a position of safety and privilege, and he uses this to help those young mutants, those young different people, find their way to safety, and he does this by giving them a place. So in the X-Men, before safe spaces was a word that anybody used, this powerful mutant created a literal physical safe space in, and I forget, I'm having a vocabulary or a nerd memory failure. It's like Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Children, I think it is. But basically, he's got this place, a school that he has built where he finds young mutants that are in trouble. He finds people that are struggling to be their true selves and to fit into the world without hurting themselves or others. And he brings them together. He shows them that they're not alone. He shows them that even though they might be unique, that there's no one like them with those powers, with those abilities in the world, there are lots of other people who are also equally unique in their own unique way. And he gives them this safe space to be themselves and to learn who they are. And once he's given them this safe space, he gives them a dangerous space. And the danger room was the full contact, really dangerous training space that showed up in the comics, but it never showed up in the movies. But basically, they use all of this cool alien technology with solid holograms and blah, blah, blah. But it's a place where they can go in and push themselves to their limits, right? They can use their powers without worrying about innocent bystanders or damaging things that shouldn't be damaged. They can really push to build and to go beyond where they were before, because if it's all about managing and hiding or conforming, it's like no one should be able to, or no one should have to live that way. And at least from what I've seen, no one can live that way for very long. So this is a chance to learn who you are and then learn what you can do. And this, to me, really, really resonated with another part of my life. So at least in the before times, before the pandemic, before the world burned, martial arts was my therapy. So there's something visceral and true about interacting with someone in a way that what they do is the thing that matters. It's not what they say, it's the truth of their body and the movement of their body in relationship to yours. And because of that, I've read a bunch of books, I've gone to a bunch of other workshops, and this guy, Rory Miller, he is a violence expert. So literally it's what he does. He does martial arts, he does self-defense, he trains military people on how to do violent things or prevent violent things from happening. But years ago, he was blogging about the difference between martial arts, which is typically like fit young guy going in who wants to be fighty, right? Like I want to learn how to punch and so on. And like the difference between martial arts and personal defense. And he really highlighted how someone who comes to a personal defense or self-defense class, these people have been through some shit. And for everybody coming in late, there will be mild swearing. I apologize if this is a problem, but you're getting the true me today. But the people who come to a self-defense class, very often they have been the victims of physical and psychological abuse, and they're coming in not because they want to start and or win fights, they just don't want to be in danger anymore. And the thing that Rory said, and this really, really resonates with me, which is he's saying, first you need to make an emotionally safe place to practice physically dangerous things. So you need to create a space for your personal defense students where if they make mistakes, it's okay. No matter whether they're having a good day or a bad day, they show up, they practice, they go through the motions, they learn. There's no judgment, there's no failure, or the failure is rewarded and acknowledged for the learning experience that it is. But when they get to a point of mastery, when they get to the point where they can do those physically dangerous things, then you have created a physically safe place for them to start doing the emotionally dangerous things. And this is what Professor Xavier did in the X-Men. This is what violence experts do for personal defense. And this is a lot of what we need to collectively do for people with mental health challenges to make sure that, first of all, we can make them welcome, or we can help be part of the solution to make us collectively welcome. And then, once we know that it's okay to be our true selves, that part of us that we've kept inside, that we've hidden because we've always been judged or rejected or excluded, when we show that part of ourselves, when we know that we're there, when we know that we can bring our true selves, we need that place to start seeing what we can do with that in the ways that were always emotionally damaging before. And I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that this is deeply personal. Like, this is the most personal, raw presentation that I'm ever likely to do. And I want to tell a little bit of my story, and I want to start off by emphasizing that I could not do this if I were not in a safe place today. So I've been in the industry for 25 years. I have been at Microsoft for 14. I speak at conferences around the world. I have earned a place for myself where I can talk freely about my failures and my weaknesses without fear of recrimination or personal or career damage. And I say this explicitly, not because it's about me, but because I recognize that most people don't have this safe space yet. Most people haven't gotten to a place where they can be vulnerable in public in front of an audience. And if you're not, don't feel bad. And if you're working towards it, just be aware that when you get there, I hope that you will do something like this yourself. But basically, this is the unfiltered me because I've gotten to a place where it's safe for me to be unfiltered. But I have an origin story. So when I was growing up, I had a father with unmanaged mental health challenges. So he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but he didn't manage it. It wasn't the best upbringing, and I love my father dearly. He's an awesome person, but he's never made peace with himself. And all of my life, I rejected the parts of my father that I saw in myself because I saw that as like the bad part. I'd only seen the bad side. And as I had started my college career, I did a little non-traditional career path talk earlier where I talked about a little of this. I used to joke, I liked Calc 2 so much I took it 3 times. But I failed out of 2 different colleges, a total of 3 times. I don't have a degree. And it's all because of this, right? It's because my anxiety, my autism spectrum behaviors, my ADHD, like all of these things are making my mind a whirlwind all the time, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I just didn't do anything. It was like sex and drugs and rock and roll. That's a safe place. I'm going to go there. It was not what I needed, but I managed to fail into an IT career, like sort of stumbled along, was in the right place at the right time, was doing a lot of hard work, but I recognize the importance of luck and the importance of having the right people in my life seeing the potential to help me, but I always hid it. If I was having a depressive episode, if I couldn't get out of bed in the morning, it was never my brain. I had a migraine, I had a sinus infection. Oh, I'm sick, I can't come in today. And when you're lying to the people around you and you're lying to yourself, you're never getting better. And 4 years ago, I was in a new job. My previous job was it was not good. So I was in a bad place before, I had moved to a new place, and I started off bright. Like I came in, I landed, I did some amazing stuff, and then I stalled. In retrospect, there were a couple factors, like family life was hard, which I'm not going to talk about here, but it was like a tough time with teenage kids. The building where I worked at Microsoft was going through construction. I'm an early person, so I would come into the office, and from like 7 o'clock when I got there until 8 o'clock, there were literally jackhammers literally on the other side of the wall. And at that point, I didn't recognize my sensory sensitivities. But this is like getting punched in the face for an hour every morning. And because of the construction, I had gotten moved from my window office to an office that didn't have any direct or indirect sunlight. And again, at that point, I didn't really realize how important sunlight was to my mental health. But these 3 things were coming together, and I was doomed. And one morning, afternoon, like one day, I'm sitting there staring, having a panic attack, looking at my inbox, because I knew that there were things that I had to do, and I just couldn't do it. Like sending that email was so hard. I'm, thinking about it, I've got goosebumps, my heart rate is racing. It was 4 years ago, and I'm past it, but it was terrifying. It's like having, you look in the rearview mirror and you can see the lights on the police car behind you and the barking of the dog and the shouting at the window. It's like all of that just to send an email. And then my boss, and I absolutely love my boss. So this was when we were getting to know each other. But he basically came in and said, "What the fuck, Matthew? You've been working on this thing for weeks. Like, just send the emails. What's wrong?" In this origin story, if think back to the comics, think back to any superhero, that moment when they realize they have the powers, like the mutation or whatever it is that comes to the fore, it's always in a moment of crisis. It's always when something terrible is happening, and the only reason they fly is because it's fly or fall. The only reason that they embrace that uniqueness, that power that they have, is because the alternative is unacceptable. And in that moment, I had nowhere to go. And I said, Mark, I don't know how to say this, but my anxiety is absolutely through the roof. And I had never mentioned any of my mental health problems to anyone in my professional life ever before that moment. And I'm like, I know that I'm letting you down. I know that I said I was going to do this last week and the week before, but I keep coming to it and I just can't do it. And I've got all of these things going on and I just don't know how to get over this. I need help. Can you help me? And my boss, this most amazing man, he doesn't have any of the challenges that I do. He doesn't get it. He can't put himself in my shoes, but he doesn't need to, because he has empathy, because he understands that people are unique, and because he knows that his team's success is a function of the success of the members of his team. And Mark basically said, we've got you. We'll figure out how to get over this. Let's talk about where you are, and let's talk about getting you into a place where you can do what you need to do. But that moment when he came in, I need to move on from this slide because I feel bad, because that's not Mark. But that moment literally changed my life. In the past, and I've mentioned this already, but I want to tie it back together. In the past, I would always hide the real challenge. I was ashamed and I was afraid to say, there's something going on in my brain, and the thing that makes me me that is keeping me from doing the thing that I want and need to do. So I would deflect and I would deceive. And that one moment of being able to say, this is the actual problem, saying it out loud, let me deal with it. And I don't know what magic happened, but being open about my challenges, I haven't taken a sick day in 2 years. I haven't had a mental health day, with the possible exception, like deadlines are hard, right? Like, I might take some time off to decompress after crunch mode if it happens, but I've never had a bad depressive episode. I've never had a panic attack that I couldn't manage. And it was that honesty, that was the moment when everything changed. And I promised you superpowers. So with the origin story out of the way, I want to talk about 3 superpowers that I see in me, riffing back to my friend who sent me that Twitter message saying that the strengths and the weaknesses are opposite sides of the same coin, like they're very related. And some of you may say, those aren't superpowers, those are coping mechanisms. And I call bullshit, because you haven't worked with me and you haven't seen the amazing things that these superpowers deliver. And my first superpower is not being British and funny. It's like both of those ships have sailed. My first superpower is fear. There are many things that I do on a day-to-day basis that scare the crap out of me. And I want to say, and the first example I'm going to use, I don't do as often anymore, but I want to share it anyway. And it's ordering coffee at Starbucks. So this is like a trivial day-to-day thing that everybody does, right? Yeah, we have Starbucks here. So you go up and you tell them what you want, and then randomly they might ask you more questions, right? And I'm laughing at myself because it's silly, but this is a very, very common thing for people on the autism spectrum, is that ad hoc personal interaction, we do something called scripting. So when I'm getting ready, like I'm standing in line, I am saying over and over and over again, I would like a venti mocha latte with 4 shots of espresso. I would like, I'll be saying this over and over and over again, even though I've done it 100 times. And when I get up there, I say it, and I've got my fingers crossed that they're not going to say, they're not going to ask, like, do I want cream, or is that 4 extra shots or 4 shots in total? Like, because I never feel prepared for that follow-up question, because talking to people is hard. Presenting to people, this is easy. This is my happy space. It's that one-on-one stuff that really takes the preparation. Now, take something trivial like ordering coffee, and let's scale it out to something like presenting to the leaders of 4 main product groups at Microsoft, because you need to drive consensus across them, right? Holy shit. And if I'm preparing for ordering coffee, imagine what I'm doing for, like, let's say, a meeting. And let's actually step back a little. Has anyone gone skydiving? So a handful of people. You are much braver than I will ever be, terrified of heights, but I think about presenting like skydiving. So when you're skydiving, I assume, and don't correct me if I'm getting this wrong, because I want to run with it, but when you're going skydiving, you spend a ton of time training, preparing, learning all of the big concepts and the little skills, and in the minutes and hours leading up to getting in the plane and then jumping out of that perfectly good plane, you check and you recheck every strap and every hook and everything about your parachute. You've got people like dotting every I and crossing every T, because once you jump out of that plane, there is no more preparing, right? It's either fly or the opposite of flying. And I take that approach to meetings. And this is a thing that I have done obsessively for many years. If I have a meeting, either where I am the owner or I am someone that needs to get something, like I need this thing to be talked about and decided at the meeting, I will basically put together in OneNote, I've got like thousands of sheets in OneNote, all very well organized. So I will put together notes with all of my agendas and talking points, like these are the agenda, these are the goals, this is what we need to talk about, and while we're talking, I'm taking notes for myself, because when you are afraid, your memory isn't writing. Like, this is a well-known neurophysiology thing, right? If you're in a fear state or a panic state, the hormones, whatever it is that writes memories, they're just not writing. Or at least they're not writing them effectively to short-term memory. So if I go into a meeting, I literally have no idea who was there, what was talked about, what was decided. If I don't take notes, I might as well have not shown up. But I realized there was one time years ago, I was sharing my screen while I was taking notes, and everyone was like, oh my God, will you share those notes after the meeting? And this has evolved over the years into a point where not only is this behavior valued and asked for explicitly by multiple leaders across multiple product orgs, a lot of what my team has done is related to the effective capturing of customer conversations so that we can use them to feed into the product roadmap and set strategic direction for Power BI and other Microsoft Data Cloud offerings. And it started off, all of that business value and career value for me, it started off because I was so scared that I couldn't remember what was going on in a meeting. So my second superpower after fear is confusion. I don't understand what motivates people. And very often, if someone says something, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. It seems like there is an undercurrent of understanding between other people in a given room where I'm the only one that doesn't know what the hell is going on. And I attribute this to my autism spectrum behaviors, where very often, I can look at your face and I just can't read what's going on behind it. I don't understand the motivations. And in Microsoft, and I've fallen into this in recent years, but in Microsoft, I have people like, oh yeah, I work in Susan's org. And it's like, who the hell is Susan? Like, what is that supposed to mean? Show me an org chart. If you show me a graphical representation of where you sit, oh yeah, that's gonna click. But everybody's like, oh yeah, well, I'm in Judson's org and I work for Bob. That means nothing to me, but it means something really deeply relevant to everybody else in the room. And I have found that in order for me to get the most from conversations and meetings, I will say things like, all right, you've used this phrase 3 times in a row. I don't know what that means. You're saying it like it really means something specific. Tell me what it means. I've started asking things like, why are we here? Like, we're 5 minutes into a 30-minute meeting, and I don't know what the hell we're talking about. Let's step back so that I understand what goals we're working towards. Otherwise, just let me know and I'll drop. And these are things, again, coming from a position of safety and privilege. I am comfortable raising my hand and being the person that acknowledges that he doesn't know what's going on, because I need to know, right? And I'm not going to hide anymore. And what I found in the before times when we're going from conference room to conference room, like everybody would go out of one meeting to walk to the next meetings, I realized that the more that I did this, the more that I acknowledged and expressed my confusion, the more people came up to thank me. Oh my God, Matthew, thank you so much for raising your hand and asking that question. I had no idea what was going on, and I was too afraid to ask. And by embracing my power, by embracing my confusion, and the knowledge of the fact that I just don't clue in on a lot of things that many people seem to clue in on, I am able not only to be more productive for me, I am able to help the broader team grow and learn because I was vulnerable. And the final superpower that I want to share is chaos. So this is my brain 99.9% of the time. I have like 1,000 threads running. There is no process manager. They're just firing, they're running. It feels every day like there's 1,000 voices in my head, and they're all talking about different things. Some of them are louder, some of them are quieter. It is deafening, and I need to manage it. Otherwise, I can't just get on with my life. And I've found that by having process and routine and structure, the things that children need, this allows me to take this chaos that is always there and to put a meaningful layer of order on top of it. And this process of constantly asking myself, what's important, what's the meaning of this thing, like doing this internal triage, I've been able to turn this outside as well. And this kind of overlaps with the confusion on the other side, or the confusion on the previous slide, where when customers are talking about their environments, there's all of these threads racing, and I'm looking at it from 1,000 different directions, and I don't really understand where they're coming from, but I can say something like, oh, well, I think that you just said this. So I've taken like their 5-minute story and I paraphrase it into 10 seconds. And it's like, please let me know, is this an effective paraphrasing? Did I miss something important? Did I miss the point entirely? Like, did I totally miss it? And what I've heard again and again and again from customers is like, wow, Matthew, you said that better than I ever could have said that myself. You've taken this really complex thing that I live every day, and you just boiled it down to something that anyone could understand. It's like, wow. I was like, I wish I'd written that down, like that sort of thing. And it's not that I'm super smart. It's not that I know more about their world than they do, but it's because I have this muscle. It's because I have been taking my chaos and twisting it and forging it into order every day for as long as I can remember. I have a skill that others don't have. I have a superpower that you might have too if you recognize it and embrace it. But the world that we live in most of the time, to me, it feels like that X-Men world, right? With the X-Men, like they have the Sentinels, the giant robots that are going around collecting and exterminating the mutants, like the dark side of the comic books. And I have to ask, does it need to be this hard? It's like, why is it that anyone who steps outside of the lane gets stomped on, gets excluded, gets institutionalized? And if we step back from the X-Men analogy, this isn't the only superhero world that we could look at. Does anybody recognize this picture? Like, raise your hand if you've seen these guys before. No one in, okay, two people. This is from a Japanese anime series called My Hero Academia. And in this world, most people have quirks. So the quirk being the superpower. And there's good guys and there's bad guys. So there's like lots of fighting and explosions and stuff because it's anime. But in this world, it's basically you get into a school where you can learn, it's like Japanese public high school. You can get into the school where you can learn how to use your superpower, how to be part of a team. And even though it's not an ideal world, the conversation, the context is really flipped around because each of these people is recognized by society as being a hero, although the dark side is that the people without quirks are kind of second-class citizens. But look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a guy that looks like he's got Concord grapes on his head. His quirk is that his body produces these little sticky, gluey balls that stick to things. That's it, right? And it's like, how is that useful? It's like, and he's like a weird little guy. Being a teenage boy, there's no judgment there. I was a weird little guy once. But there have been multiple times throughout the series where this power has been the thing that has kept everybody from getting destroyed, right? And a lot of it comes down to both having a place where you can bring your authentic self and being part of a team in a situation where the thing that you bring that no one else brings is valuable and necessary. And I said at the beginning, I'm probably going to cry. This is where it's likely to happen if it happens. So the other superhero universe that probably everyone knows about is like the Justice League, the DC universe, and so on. And what few people know is that before he joined the Justice League, Superman worked for years as a kryptonite delivery boy. And he felt like a goddamn loser. Every day, he saw the people around him doing what he was trying to do, and it was always easy, and they never struggled, and he felt like he was going to die. And he felt lesser, and he felt bad, and he felt weak. And it wasn't him. It's that he was in a place that was wrong for him. He was being asked to do something that may be easy for everybody else, but for him it was killing him because it was kryptonite. And for much of my life at Microsoft, so I've been at Microsoft for almost 14 years, and for that first decade, I felt like I never knew what was going on. I never knew what I was supposed to do. Everybody around me understood what being a program manager was all about. Oh, you just need to walk the halls, Matthew. Just walk around and talk to everyone and see what's going on, and then you know, and then you act. I was like, I can't do that. Today, I can't do that. And because I was in a place where to be successful in that job, the only path to success that was presented to me was carrying kryptonite. It's a wonder that I made it. It's a wonder that I stayed. It's a wonder that I found the team and the place where I could make the difference, where I could fly, and where I could be the person doing what no one else could do. But it took that moment of crisis. It took me acknowledging where I was and what I was before I could make that leap, before I was afraid enough to fly. And I wanted, like when I first started putting these slides together, the thing that I wanted to build up to was like, what superhero am I, right? It's like, what's the Marvel character or whatever that Matthew sees himself in? And the first one that leapt to mind is like this scene from the Avengers movie where Bruce Banner, the Hulk, says, well, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry. Because my anxiety expresses itself as anger. I am almost always angry because I am almost always stressed. And this has caused me no end of problems in my work and family life over the years. But this isn't me. This is certainly not my superpower. This is just part of who I am. And I would like to think that over time, I will grow to be someone like Professor Xavier, where I can be that voice of authority, the elder statesman of the data mutant community, where I can take big steps to make big changes and make people's lives better, to give them that place to grow and to fly. But I recognize I am not there yet. I'm working towards it. So I had to keep thinking, and I ended up with someone that you may not think of as a superhero, unless you've played video games like this is the medic from Team Fortress Classic. So like shooter game where everybody goes around and blows everybody else up, and the people that blow the other side up the most win. The medic, his gun doesn't shoot bullets or rockets or fire or lasers, it shoots health. Like he goes around so that the people with the big guns can blow up more people and get blown up less themselves, right? That's me. And one of the reasons why I failed and failed and failed, never enough to get fired, but failed consistently enough that, boy, those promotions and raises were few and far between. In the old Microsoft, like Steve Ballmer's Microsoft, was very competition-based. We had calibration and stack ranking. If I was going to win, that meant that other people had to lose. So I needed to ship the biggest thing, the brightest thing, the thing that got the marketing support and the keynote demo. And if somebody else on my team shipped a bigger thing than I did, they got the lion's share of the promotions. When Satya came in, he changed that. Microsoft today is about being part of a bigger team and helping that bigger team succeed. And oh my God, this is what I was made for. The place where I shine and the place where I love to be is where I am not the person that owns the output. I am not the person responsible for the success of the product or the feature or the thing, but I am the person there providing services, providing support, providing help, providing connections. I'm the medic, and finding a team that needed a medic, finding a team and an org and a place where I could bring who I am and what I do and what I'm good at, this changed my life, and this is why I'm here today. And as we move into the closing, we've got a little bit more than 5 minutes left, and I hope that there are some questions. I see a lot of nods and smiles as we go through, but from a next steps perspective, I want to emphasize and say that the people around you that you may look at and see, this is a success, like this person has it all, they're doing all of these things that I could only dream of, or they're in a place that I could only dream of being in, those people are struggling just like you are, but none of us, almost none of us, are in a place where we can share the failures and the struggle. So when you see someone, when you see them at work, you see them on social media in particular, everybody amplifies their successes and they hide their struggles. I do this too. So I have like a screenshot folder of tweets I will never send. And so we're wrapping up the fiscal year 22, but at the beginning of the fiscal year, like last July, August, oh my God, it was hard, right? And I see one member of my team who's on the call, like literally, there were weeks where I could not go a day without ending up literally in tears, crying on a Teams call in a work meeting, because there's so much going on. The world is burning around me. Work is hard, life is hard, family is hard. Everybody is struggling, and nobody is going to tell you about it. And what I want to say is, recognize where you are, be honest with yourself about your struggles. As you can, find a place to be honest publicly. Not everyone is in the safe space that I am, so don't do anything that would put your career or your safety at risk. Sometimes being honest with people, not all people are ready for this conversation, but talking about mental health is important. Acknowledging your challenges and your struggles is important, and recognizing that the people around you that never seem to have any problems, they probably do. They're probably just hiding them behind or under the surface or behind those closed doors. And at this point, I want to say both thank you to everyone that has come in person. It's really stupid early, and everyone who has dialed in online from around the world. And as we move to Q&A, I want to encourage everyone to please take a minute to fill out the satisfaction or feedback survey for this session and each session that you attend, because not only will SQLBits plant a tree for every 10 surveys that they receive, this is the only big tech conference that I have ever seen that has gone out of its way to include sessions like this. And if this was valuable for you, the only way you'll ever see it again is if you let people know. So with that said, we've got 4 minutes for Q&A. Thank you very, very much. And if nobody raises their hand, Laura.
For the people who aren't neurodiverse, for the fact that your manager did the what the fuck, Matthew, what's the advice for an organisation to give the managers the what the fuck, Matthew?
Yes. So the question from the audience is, for people who are neurotypical, so you don't have these challenges yourself, but who want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, what advice can we give them as managers or team members or as organizations to have effective conversations? And I want to start off by saying, first of all, I am not qualified to answer that question. So this is a question for your diversity officer or a psychologist. But what I have observed is that it comes down to having an explicit, broad acknowledgement that neurodiversity, or diversity in general, diversity is strength. So we're not, like a monoculture thrives and then it dies. A monoculture cannot live in any context for any length of time. So organizationally, you acknowledge that diversity is strength, and then you acknowledge that neurodiversity is a key aspect of diversity. And for managers, a lot of it comes down to empathy, and a lot of it comes down to providing them with specific training. Like Microsoft does a great job of this. There's actually neurodiversity training for managers that as a people manager you are required to complete to understand what some of the behaviors and activities that you may see on your team, how to have difficult conversations, and how to be a safe listener so that it doesn't take a crisis, it doesn't take a what the fuck Matthew moment for this conversation to begin. And if as a manager, we've got 1 minute left, so this will be the one question. If as a manager, everybody on your team knows that they can come to you with questions or problems without risk of danger, that's the most important thing to do. So if I can come to you to say, oh, I've got this bug in my code and we're going to miss a deadline, if that's okay, then it will be more okay when they come in with a more personal problem that's harder to talk about. Empathy and understanding and the openness of the broader conversation is the most important thing that I see. But again, I'm just one voice and I am not an authoritative voice here. And I will say in closing, for the folks that are here in person, I will be around for most of the day today. If at any point that you see me and you want to continue this conversation one-on-one or in a small group, I would be delighted to do that. And until then, thank you so much for having me. It has been an honor.